Okay. First, the environmental problems. As you know, many diseases and many problems of us as humans are related by environmental factors. We have two definitions for environment. The ambient environment is all the outdoor environment and all the things that surround us, outdoor, indoor, and occupational factors. And personal environment is the things from the outside of our body that we impose to our body. For example, when we smoke cigars, we ingest alcohol or some drugs, therapeutic drugs or recreational drugs. These are related to our personal environment, okay? The environmental diseases, as all the things we will discuss today, refers to disorders caused by all the chemical and physical factors that influence our bodies. Okay? It is, as we said, the factors in ambient environment, in our workplace, and also the personal environment, which we discussed earlier. Environmental diseases are so important, and there is one statement in your book that says International Labour Organization estimated that work-related problems and illnesses kill more people per year globally than do road accidents and wars together. We think that road accidents is a big deal on human and also wars, but you see that based on statistics, injuries and illnesses of work-related injuries and illnesses are far more important. And another thing that maybe we think that work-related problems are more accidents, but illnesses are more important and more prevalent than accidents at work. There are some terminologies which are new in your book, in the latest edition of your book, and I want to discuss it here a little bit more. Health disparity, do you know what does it mean, disparity? As a word, not health disparity. No one knows the disparity? What? No? No one? Okay. Disparity means inequality, or somehow we can say difference. And health disparity, it has somehow a negative meaning, and it's something like difference in a negative way. Somehow like the Arabic word tabiz. Maybe it's more tangible for you. Yeah. And health disparities are the differences in incidence, prevalence, and severity of the disease between groups of people. And these groups of people, which will be maybe are defined by their gender, their social classes, or even their race. Okay, there are some differences between different populations in incidence, prevalence, and even severity of the diseases. And based on the study stated in your book, these disparities, these differences are based on the environmental factors, not the genetic factors. I will discuss it in the slides. Another terminology which is somehow close to disparity and the difference between different populations is the definition of race. And racism is somehow a popular word that you will hear and in modern societies. And we want to define the definition of race here. In 19th century, the naturalists and geneticists argued that there are between 2 to 63 human races all around the world. And it's somehow very, between 2 and 63, isn't it a wide range? This wide range shows that somehow this term is somehow ambiguous, or between 2 and 63 is somehow not. For example, if you say between 40 and 50, it's somehow better to say between 2 and 63. It means it's somehow ambiguous. And in 1960s, they recognized that there is not much genetic polymorphism, the frequency of genetic polymorphisms between, for example, Africans, Asians, or Europeans, the races which were known at that time. There is not much similarity in these groups based on the genetic polymorphisms. And it somehow put the term of race on some doubt, because it didn't have a solid ground like the genetic, the genetic problems or the genetic polymorphisms. Okay, and there is the biological conception of race, as I mentioned, is based on 2 criteria. First of all, if you want to say that one population is a distinct race and is different from other populations, it should have these 2 criteria. First is that the amount of genetic variation within this group compared to the genetic variation between these 2 groups should be significant. And the other one, any group within a species can be shown to be an evolutionary distinct population. We should follow the evolution of, for example, human beings, and say that from these genetic alteration, this population is distinct from other population based on, for example, these genetic alteration in their genes. And in this way, we say that racism or race is have a solid ground, but we cannot prove it in this way. And as we said, studies of human populations show that the genetic variation between, for example, the group which are called the Africans, between them, they have more genetic variation than between, for example, Africans and East Asians. Okay, and based on genetic grounds, there were no distinct race. You cannot differentiate people based on their genetic alterations. Okay, and as I said, no biologically distinct races in modern humans are are defined. As I said, this is the word said by geneticists and biological anthropologists. Okay, it further proves that the environmental factors, because we know that health disparity exists. Okay, but based on these considerations, we realize the importance of the environmental factors on diseases. If one disease is more prevalent in one group of people, it's not because of their genes. It's the environmental factors are more important. Okay. Okay. Next session is about the climate change, which again is in our environment, and it has many influences on our health. And this is a diagram based on your book, and there is a summary of all effects of climate change on human health. First of all, when we talk about climate change, we are talking about these four phenomena: rising temperatures, extreme weather, rising sea levels, and increasing CO2 levels. Okay? And these are interchangeable. You know, rising temperatures gives rise to rising sea levels, and also increasing CO2 level gives rise to rising temperatures and rising sea levels. They are interconnected, but they can be separated based on the problems that they cause in human body. For example, in extreme weather, we can talk about air pollution, which has detrimental effects on asthmatic people and people with cardiovascular diseases. Also, extreme weather will give rise to changes in vector ecology, and the diseases borne by these vectors are more prevalent in parts of the world which it was not prevalent before that. For example, malaria, lung fever, encephalitis, hantavirus, Rift Valley virus, Lyme disease, West Nile virus, they are all vector-borne diseases, and they are somehow influenced by changes in our environment and changes in weather. Rising sea levels, which is an influence of rising temperatures, increase allergens, and it has influence on respiratory diseases, asthma, and allergic people, and it has a detrimental impact on water quality. And decreased water quality gives rise to all the problems and all the diseases caused by, for example, by the organisms that live in water. For example, flora, cryptosporidiosis, Campylobacter, leptospirosis, and some algae are organisms that live in water, and when the quality of water is decreased, these diseases will be more prevalent. It impacts the increase in CO2 level impacts water and food supply, and it gives rise to malnutrition and diarrheal diseases. All of these problems are somehow interrelated. And environmental degradation gives rise to forced migration of people, because the habitats are no longer no longer has good, for example, weather, good water quality, and these things to live here, live there, and they are forced to migrate to other places, and immigrants are have basically they have low income, they are poor, and these have an impact on the society where they go. As the fourth one, rising temperatures, as we said, causes injuries and mental health impacts, and also cardiovascular failure and heat-related illnesses and death. You know, all the impacts of climate change are summarized in this diagram. Okay, as I said, rising temperature causes the problems and the alterations in our atmosphere, and even ocean temperature will rise. And these rise in ocean temperature changes storm frequency, gives rise to drought, flood, and as I mentioned, many people are forced to migrate to other places. Also, the rising temperature gives rise to melting of land-based ices, and gives rise to elevation of the sea level. Okay, and this again causes some parts of world to go underwater, and the people who live there should go to other places. And as I said, migration is not a good environmental factor. You think why the temperature, the global temperature is rising? Do you know what can we do for that? And is there anything related to human?
Ozone layer.
What?
It's because of ozone layer has like cooling.
Yes, and
burning fossil fuels.
yes, which gives rise to greenhouse gases. Yes, CO2, ozone, and methane, which are influenced by the burning fossil fuels, as your friend said, gives rise to greenhouse gases, and the greenhouse gases, together with water vapor, gives rise to greenhouse effect. And do you know what is the greenhouse effect, and why is it is called greenhouse? What is a greenhouse?
The place are that planet
Yeah. The places which we build
across the planet.
to plant, for example, flowers and other things. Yes, this is called greenhouse, which has glasses in their walls and roof and all around it. Okay, that's greenhouse. And why is it called greenhouse effect? Because, as I said, CO2, ozone, and all the gases produced by burning fossil fuels, along with water, goes to the atmosphere and causes something like that glasses in a greenhouse, and doesn't allow the temperature produced on the earth to go to the atmosphere. And this temperature comes back to the land, to our board, and causes a rising temperature, melting of the ices, and all of these effects has, as we said, gives rise ocean levels and sea levels. Um, as we said, CO2 is produced by burning fossil fuels. Okay. Another thing that causes a rise in CO2 level is deforestation, because all the trees and all the plants somehow fix the CO2. They absorb CO2 and use it in, for example, producing leaves or producing fruits and these things. Okay. When we don't have many trees and many plants on the earth, which is called deforestation. Deforestation means D means not having, removing the forest from the land. When we have less trees and plants and these things on the earth, it results in again elevation of CO2 level and again greenhouse effect. Okay. The other terminology that is again related to environmental diseases is toxicity. And you know that toxins are somehow poisons, and the toxicology is the science of poisons. It studies the distribution, effects, and mechanisms of actions of toxic agents. When we are talking about a toxin or a poison, this poison is not always the chemical poisons or the chemical toxins. Physical agents such as radiation and heat are also categorized under the category of toxic agents based on our thought. Okay, and another terminology which is somehow similar to toxins or poisons is xenobiotics. Xenobiotics are all exogenous chemicals in the environment that may be absorbed to our body through inhalation, ingestion, or skin contact. Okay, that's a terminology somehow similar to poison or toxic agent. As you see in this diagram, the toxins are in the air, in water, or in soil. And the human body exposes to these agents, and through inhalation, through lung, ingestion from GI tract, or contact on skin, we are somehow influenced by xenobiotics or toxins. When these toxins go to our body and by absorbed and go to bloodstream, they have different ways to go. Some of these toxins are stored in our body, and because of this storage,
You can see.
you can see why not. The cursor you can see.
لا هي ماتشات.
Iron point, regular point.
How can I
These are laser.
These are not like this.
Thank you. Yes. When that toxin goes into our body, it can be stored. It depends on the toxin or the xenobiotic. It can be stored, or it can be metabolized. And some of these toxins, first of all, are not toxic. When they are metabolized, they from the beginning. And after metabolism, there are some of them are excreted, or some of them go to again store in our body. These are different ways that toxic chemicals will go through in our body. Okay, there are some ways, again, we are summarizing these. They can be excreted in urine or feces. They can be eliminated in our expired air, or they will accumulate in our body. As we said, they will store in our body in bone, in fat, brain, or other tissues. They can store in our body. And as we said, some of them are toxic from the entry. They act at the site of entry, and some of them are not. They are transported to other sites of body to have their toxic effects. And most of agents are metabolized in our body, and this metabolism is to detoxify somehow these chemicals. Most of the chemicals which are metabolized are to be detoxified and change to water soluble products in order to be excreted in urine and go out of the body. But there are some toxins or xenobiotics which are activated in the process of metabolism, and is somehow a detrimental effect that our body does it. You know, there are two phases of reactions which are done in our body in order to detoxify the toxins. Phase 1 reactions are hydrolysis, oxidation, or reduction. One of these reactions are done on chemicals to be somehow to get rid of it, to excrete it, for example, in urine and detoxify it. And the products of phase 1 reactions often go through another reaction which are called phase 2 reactions in order to be water soluble and, as I said, to go out of the body. The phase 2 reactions are glucuronidation, sulfation, methylation, or conjugation with glutathione. And these are the reactions, as we said, in the metabolism of toxic chemicals. Again, there is a diagram which is informative somehow. When a toxin or xenobiotic comes into our body do all his effort to eliminate it. And it's the best way a toxin can go in our body. But there are some other ways, as we said. There are some non-toxic metabolites. There are some xenobiotics that through metabolism becomes a reactive metabolite and is toxic after the metabolism. And their effects are on our proteins or our enzymes, the receptors, the membrane, or the DNA content of our body. And in these 4 ways, they do their toxic effect. And the toxicity is based on their effect on different parts of our body.
Doctor,
Yeah.
this is 2 phase as for detoxification.
2 phases, yeah, for detoxification. But as I mentioned, there are some toxins that go through these ways and become more toxic. There are some components that like this. But these reactions are basically to detoxify the toxins. But there are some chemicals that have this ability to become more toxic after these reactions, you know? Okay, these reactions are basically done by our cytochrome P450 system. Are you familiar with this system? Have you heard the name before? No? It's a system, as I said, which is really important in metabolism of chemicals, and more importantly, the metabolism of many drugs in our body. And it's a super important system in our body. This cytochrome is present throughout our body, but the more important part of body that has this system and is effective in detoxification of toxins is the plasmic reticulum of our liver. You know, this system is present throughout our body, but the most important part is in liver, and it's in the plasmic reticulum of liver cells. And as I mentioned, their act is to detoxify, but there are some toxins that become more active after going through this system. And there is another problem. First of all, we said that after these processes, some chemicals are become more toxic. Okay, it's the first phase. Even if this system do his best to detoxify the toxins, there are some byproducts which are reactive oxygen species, and these are ROS. These products are by itself toxic agents. You know, even if that system detoxify the toxin which is in our body, because it produces ROS, it is somehow harmful for our bodies. You know, for example, when we see these slides and we say that if I am exposed to some toxins, that's fine. Our body has these systems and detoxify it. No, it's not fine. You know, even if it can detoxify that toxin, it produces ROS, which is which has detrimental effects on our health. Okay, and these are two mechanisms that toxins, even if they are detoxified, can harm our body. Okay, there are some products, as I said, which become activated after our metabolism in this system, which is carbon tetrachloride, which becomes to free, which is more activated and changes to free radicals, or benzopyrene, which is a toxic agent, a carcinogen present in cigarette smoke, which through this system it becomes more toxic, and it acquires DNA binding abilities, and it becomes more toxic through this system. As I mentioned, this cytochrome has some other actions, and there is the main way of metabolism of some drugs, such as acetaminophen, barbiturates, anticonvulsants, and alcohol. And you saw that cigarette smoke is also between the things that are metabolized in this system. The activity of the enzymes in this cytochrome is very somehow different among people. It is related to polymorphism of the genes of these enzymes or the drugs that some people use and which has effects on this system. You see that, for example, fasting or starvation decreases the enzymes in this system, and alcohol or smoking increases the enzymes in this system. And as you see, for example, when we smoke, it increases the activity of the system, and if you remember, the smoke of cigarette becomes more toxic through this system, and it's somehow a two-way effect to influence more our bodies and have worse effects on our body. Okay, now we want to talk about air pollution, and as you see, Environmental Protection Agency or EPA, they have some boards. I don't know if you have it here in Kish. We have lots of these boards in larger cities. For example, Tehran, there are some boards which which we can see the level of these polluting agents on that boards. These are six most important components of air pollution, and they are the components which has worst effects on our health. And as you see, there is a table, and any of these six agents have effects on our bodies. And I wanted you to see that even when we say that, for example, based on the EPA indicators, there are some, for example, sometimes that they say that children and people having cardiovascular diseases, it's better not to come out of the home and don't have activities, outdoor activities. But it's important to know that all these agents have effects on even healthy adults. There is not only people, asthmatic people, or people having cardiovascular diseases which are influenced by air pollution. All people are influenced, but the influence is more pronounced on children or people having cardiovascular diseases, people having lung problems. But they all have effects even on healthy individuals, and it's super important. Also, as we talked about in greenhouse effect, also is a product which is produced by the effect of sunlight on nitrogen oxides, and it's somehow I can say the most important component of air pollution. And its toxicity is by producing free radicals detrimental effect of ozone is pronounced when it is coupled with particulate pollution also. These two together influence each other in a negative way. And when we were influenced by COVID-19, I think we all were introduced to that the size of particles is important in their toxic effect. The particles which are smaller than 10 micrometer are more important or more harmful than particles which are larger than this size, because the particles which are larger are filtered by our nose and upper respiratory tract, but the particles smaller than this size go through all the airway and go to our lungs. And here they are somehow bite and eaten by macrophages and neutrophils. They are phagocytons. And when the macrophages and neutrophils try to eliminate them, they release reactive oxygen species. And the mediators, and as we said, that have bad effects on our respiratory system. You know, again, it's somehow negative effect of our body and our protection system that has negative effects on our body again. And as we said, the larger particles don't reach the alveoli and don't have these effects. Carbon monoxide, as one of these air pollutants, we will discuss it a little further, is non-irritating, colorless, tasteless, and odorless gas. It is, as we said, it is the product of incomplete oxidation, and low levels of carbon monoxide is somehow in our air, and but it has some effects on people which have impaired respiratory function, as all other gases we talked about in air pollution. But the low levels are not life-threatening. It's only somehow bad for people with impaired respiratory function. But chronic poisoning of CO is also a phenomenon that has effect on people who work in places with increased level of CO. For example, people who work in tunnels or in garage, they are somehow at risk of chronic CO poisoning. For example, the deaths caused by carbon monoxide is somehow it can be accidental or even suicidal deaths. You know, if you go to a closed garage and run the car engine, or for even 5 minutes, it can the carbon monoxide in the air of that confined garage will go through lethal level even in 5 minutes, and it's way for suicidal deaths. And for example, children which are confined in, for example, these types of garage will be an important example of accidental death due to carbon monoxide poisoning. Do you know how carbon monoxide can kill people?
It oversaturates the RBC.
Yeah, by making hemoglobin and prevent autotrophism.
Yes, that's fine, yes. It has affinity to bind to hemoglobin. It has affinity to bind to hemoglobin, and this binding is not it's permanent. When one molecule of CO binds to hemoglobin, it cannot be separated from hemoglobin. It's permanent. And also it has greater affinity than O2 to bind to hemoglobin. And these and it has its effect by somehow is called systemic asphyxiant. There is oxygen in air also, but the hemoglobin cannot bind to oxygen and transport it through the body. And in this way, all our cells are somehow killed, and after that, the body, the human is dead. First of all, the CO poisoning, as we said, causes hypoxia. And the first system which is influenced by this hypoxia is our CNS and our nervous system. And because of this, the people who are influenced by this gas, they are unaware of the problems which is happening for them. They lose their consciousness, and after that they die. When the CO level in our body becomes 20% to 30%, it gives rise to unconsciousness, and this is probable when the level goes to 60% or 70%. With chronic poisoning, as we said, for example, in people who work in places which are confined, and for example, people who work in tunnels and in garage, is somehow the chronic poisoning. There are some influence on brain, basal ganglia, and lenticular nuclei. It's again the most prominent effect is on our CNS. As we discussed, acute poisoning is somehow accidental or suicidal, and when the body of a person who has died due to CO poisoning is surveyed by people, we have these phenomena, cherry red color of the skin and the mucous membranes, which is somehow characteristic of CO poisoning. And this is because of the binding of, as we said, the permanent binding of CO to hemoglobin, which has this cherry red color. And this color can be seen through skin or mucous membranes. If a person who is influenced by CO is somehow survive, if person survives, there is some minor problems for these types of people, they will have some problems with vision, hearing, speech, and memory, and maybe they are permanent effects, and maybe they are not reversible. Other pollutants of environmental pollutants are metals. First of all, we will discuss about lead poisoning. The mechanism of poisoning in lead poisoning is attachment of lead to sulfate groups in our proteins. And also, lead interferes with calcium metabolism. And there are two ways that lead poisoning can influence our bodies and show its toxic effects. Lead poisoning and exposure of our body with lead can be through air, food, or water. At present, there are less usage of lead in our environment, but there are some houses which are somehow old, and in their paints, lead has been used, and this is a source of exposure of our body to lead, or even the lead which is added to our gasoline. These are two ways that modern people are influenced by lead. Also, in mines, in foundries, in spray paints, also there are some amount of lead that we can be exposed to these metals. As we said, in older houses which are painted by lead-based paints, maybe the lead level, blood lead level exceeds the level that CDC, Center for Disease Control and Prevention, recommends for children. Children living in these old homes will have the lead level which exceeds the CDC level. Level. And why we said children, lead poisoning is more important in children because the absorbance of lead is more in children. They absorb more than 50% of lead from food, but adults absorb only 15% of the lead which they are exposed to. And also, children have a more permeable blood-brain barrier, and the influence of that lead is more pronounced, more on CNS of children than in older people. This is a diagram that somehow summarizes the effects of lead on our body. As you see, we can be exposed to lead through occupational means or through environmental means. For example, lead in water supply, as we said, in paint, or in automotive exhaust, or contaminated soil. The effects of lead is more pronounced in brain, in our CNS. For adults, it's somehow headache and memory loss, but on children, as we said, because they have a more permeable blood-brain barrier, they it will produce encephalopathy or mental deterioration on children. In gingiva, we can see lead lines or bottom lines is a sign, it's not a significant effect. The effect of lead on blood, it gives rise to anemia, and there is some somehow pathognomonic sign in the PBS or blood smear of these people, which is called basophilic stippling. It has detrimental effects on kidney, chronic tubular interstitial disease. In GI, it gives rise to abdominal pain, and in adults, demyelination of peripheral nervous system is a sign of lead poisoning, and in bones of children, we can see again lead lines in their feces. As we said, the problems of lead is more pronounced on nervous system, in children on central nervous system, and in adults in peripheral nervous system as neuropathy. We can see the effects. And another difference between adults and children is that the effects of lead on peripheral nervous system of adults is reversible, but the effects of lead on central nervous system of children is somehow irreversible. This is X-ray of children, as we see, with lead lines. As we said, the lead will accumulate in their bones and in their new bones, in their feces, and it's somehow diagnostic feature in children influenced by lead. As we said, it accumulates in gums and causes lead lines in gingiva, and on kidney. As we said, it has effects on proximal tubules, and it gives rise to tubular interstitial nephritis. On blood, you saw that it gives rise to anemia, and also because of the effects on ATPases in red blood cells. It's another picture of people influenced by lead is hemolysis. You know, it gives rise to anemia and also hemolysis, and these two together somehow make the anemia more severe. When the lead interferes in the production of hemoglobin, and this interference gives rise to elevation in red cell-free protoporphyrin, and it's an intermediate product in the way of making hemoglobin. And because of these byproduct accumulates in our blood and also in red cells. We can diagnose the poisoning by elevated blood lead level. Also, red cell-free porphyrin level is elevated, and zinc protoporphyrin level also are elevated. Again, another diagram which summarizes the effects of lead on our body based on its level in the blood. You see that when it goes up to for example, 150 grams per milliliter, death will occur. And before that, encephalopathy, neuropathy, anemia, colic, and other minor problems are with smaller levels, blood levels. And you see that even the least amount of lead in blood in children gives rise to decreased IQ level, decreased hearing, decreased growth of children, and because of this, the amount of lead in blood of children is so important, because even minor amounts has important effects on children.
Do we have to memorize this? Like the numbers?
The things that I mentioned, no, not the levels.
Okay.
Only this part, the effects, not the effects with their levels. The second method that we want to just mention that is the mercury. Mercury, like lead, again bonds to sulfate groups of proteins and enzymes, and also it has effects on CNS, GI tract, and kidney. We are exposed to mercury by contaminated fish, but the fish which are somehow larger and consume smaller fish. It has somehow the level of mercury in their body goes up, and when we consume these large fish which are apex predators somehow, we are exposed to increased amounts of mercury, and it can be somehow poisonous. And also dental amalgams, the older ones which are not used anymore. And also gold mining is another way that which will contaminate rivers or waters and give rise to mercury poisoning. It's a somehow syndrome called Miniata disease, which is seen in children which are exposed to elevated levels of mercury when they were in utero. Okay, it's because of that that we say to pregnant women not to use lots of fish, large fish, which are apex predators, like, for example, shark and these types of fish are somehow limited during pregnancy. And this is because of this syndrome, which gives rise to cerebral palsy, deafness, blindness, and major CNS effects in fetus. The last slide of us on environmental diseases, the first part of our talk is about bisphenol A or BPA. It's a chemical which is used in polycarbonate food and water containers, and also in epoxy resins which line the food bottles and cans and these things. And exposure to this chemical has some effects on our endocrine system. For example, it gives rise to hypothyroidism, or it has effects on our sexual development because of that endocrine effect. And also it has some effects on our cardiovascular system and definitely on our heart. And because of this, the use of this product on food containers and plastics which are used as a food container is limited, and this limitation started from Canada, and now we can see that on all the food containers it is written, for example, BPA free. And it's important for all people and more pronounced for bottles and snack box of children. It's really important because it has deterrent effects more pronounced on children. And now we are somehow free from this product because their effects are now recognized, and most of the containers now